I know it's a little bit early of a session, but I'm really excited to share with you the introduction to Journey Builder development. How many people here have had at least a little bit of exposure to the Marketing Cloud? So everyone, pretty much everyone. Okay, good. Gives me a good indicator of what I need to touch on and what I don't. So my name is Jake Miller. I'm the software engineering manager for Journeys, which is part of the Marketing Cloud. So today, safe harbor, I have to show that. Today I want to start out by talking about sort of this transition period that we're in for marketing. And, you know, traditionally marketing has been posters, billboards, emails, mobile push messages, right? And that's all been fine and dandy. But over the past couple years, we've started to see a shift towards event-driven marketing and marketing automation and taking millions of messages, aggregating that data and making better decisions on how we engage with our customers and how we listen to our customers. And there's not really been a great tool there to do that. So what the Marketing Automation Group has done is we've tackled that problem head on. So, and it's actually been a really exciting one, life cycles and marketing automation. So if you think there are 10 billion devices in the world right now, there are, I think, 8 billion people in the world. So if you can imagine all the chatter that those devices are creating, and it's not just things like mobile phones and laptop computers, it's our Fitbits, it's our refrigerators, it's our cars. And so we really need a system that we can use to manage all of that. So I was reading an article by Sarah Epps, who's an analyst for Forrester, and the title was, "There is no Internet of Things." And I thought, how could someone make this claim when there are 10 billion devices in the world? And people, I mean, Facebook Messenger, I think the average person posts, or to Facebook, 40 to 60 times a day, something like that. So how can you claim that there's no Internet of Things? So if you notice the date, that was 2013. That's about a year ago tomorrow. And I read the article, and her point was, okay, yeah, we have all these devices, but we don't really do anything intelligent with them. We could actually be more strategic, and they can actually be a lot more sophisticated. And one of the examples she uses was, I thought was fun, was basketball. A basketball game, right? And you have a player that's on the court, and you have everyone in the stadium that wants to decide whether they want to take that player out of the game or not. So that was sort of an interesting one. Or I have my phone, and I need an Uber for hot dogs, right? Like, I'm really hungry. I need a hot dog right now. So that's sort of just a setting for this journey. So what I'm going to go through today is I'm going to talk about anatomy of an interaction. I'm going to talk about how you can manage interactions, and then how you can extend Journey Builder. So, a little bit of math terms this morning. Interactions are nothing more than directed acyclic graphs, and that is just a fun way to say that they can branch. So you have your nodes and edges. It can branch. It can merge. And it's unidirectional, which is to say that there are no cycles. It's one direction. That's it, right? It's that easy. So throughout the talk, I'm going to use an example. I'm going to have this interaction, a one-to-one interaction, that a person registers. So Jake registers for Dreamforce, but I've not confirmed my registration. So I need to engage with Jake to determine, or to get him to confirm that registration. Now, this is a little bit contrived. I apologize, but it'll serve the purposes of this presentation. So Jake, we're going to decide. If he prefers email, I'm going to send him an email message. If he does not, I'm going to send him a mobile message, a push notification to his phone. Then I'm going to join, and then I'm going to do some custom activity. I'll talk about that later. And then that's the end of that interaction. One thing I need to clarify. So I've used the term interaction, but I haven't really explained what that is. Journey Builder consists of journeys, which is a collection of interactions. So interactions are the smallest piece of how you interact with people or engage with your customers. So I was also reading an old paper from 2003 because I apparently like really old, outdated academic articles. And Louise Barkas made this point that most participants in her study use their phone between 5 and 10 times a day to make phone calls and text message. And that's really funny now when we talk about all these devices and all this chatter, and how do you actually manage all that information? And that's where events come into play. Something else I need to mention. Traditionally, what marketers have done is they'll take millions of contacts and they'll send an email to them. They'll send a mobile message to them. We're obviously starting to see more and more where people are sending targeted, geofencing messages and that sort of thing. But what we're really trying to push for is this event-driven marketing automation, where someone does something and you react to it. Or someone does something, you wait a couple days, see if they do something else, and then react to that. And that's what we're talking about here. So we're trying to push things to be event-driven. So when I'm talking about events and interactions, what happens with Journey Builder is you can have an event, and we'll use Jake registered for connections, and you can actually have multiple interactions that will act when that event occurs. So what actually happens is the event, Jake registered, goes to what we call our event router, and then that fires off or invokes, it instantiates 2 different interactions. So this is just for my example. One is if I've conferred my registration, I'm going to do something. If I've not conferred my registration, I'm going to do something else, because you can obviously see there are 2 different ways I'm going to interact with this person if these conditions are different. So I trigger an interaction. So the event occurred, I'm going to trigger the interaction. And one very confusing point I need to clarify for you, and the only reason this even is called a trigger is for marketer purposes. So it's one of those things you just accept it for what it is. Triggers consist of events and filters. And so the event Jake registered, and the filter is, did I confer my registration or not? And this filter actually comes out of the contact model. How many people are familiar with the contact model in the Marketing Cloud? Probably no one. Okay. How many people have, one person. How many people have heard or understand the data extensions in the Marketing Cloud? A couple more. Okay. So data extensions are like custom objects in Salesforce, but they live in the Marketing Cloud. And on top of that, we have a contact model, and it's a way for you to build a holistic view of all the data, so marketers can easily pull the attributes that they want to work with. And that's where this filter comes into play. This data could live anywhere in their data model, and we'll just filter off of it. So invoking interaction, what actually happens? There are 2 different ways that interactions can be invoked. First is through Automation Studio. It basically simulates events occurring. You take a data extension, and then for each of those, it'll invoke an interaction. Most people in this room, though, are probably more interested in our API, where you can actually, from a device or from some system, fire off these events into our system. So what happens from there is it hits our event router. It determines what interactions that event needs to invoke, and those requests get put into our request queue. And then we have this engine that just pulls off that request queue and processes all those. So the most interesting thing on the slide, in my opinion, is this data context. So interactions all require a contact key, and that provides us the context of who you're talking about, who you're interacting with. That way we know where to pull data from in your system and what specific data about that person we need. And that'll become more important as we talk about data binding, which is also really exciting. So design time and runtime, you probably would expect from a workflow engine, that's basically what this is, that there would be a design time where you're building out a definition. This is what I want the interaction to do. And runtime, which is it's actually executing based on the data context. So Jake is the contact. I'm going to do something based on the information for that person. So I've put this together. So I click register. Then there are 2 interactions, the registered and the not registered definition. I'm going to instantiate both of those. So I'll have instances of those in my request queue. So the final component to an interaction are goals. And this is the thing that makes it most powerful. is not only do we want to do things and communicate with people, but we want to measure the effectiveness of what we've designed. Did the person open the email? Are people opening the emails within the first day, or does it take them a week? Or when I send them a push notification when they're near my, my device, are they actually engaging with me? And so you set a goal to determine that. Now, goals are not part of the flow. And that is because goals are evaluated in a couple different ways. We evaluate it when the interaction's triggered. So Jake registered for connections, and say my goal is I want to make sure he confirms that registration. Oh, no, he hasn't. Continue on. Then we evaluate them after each wait. I'll talk about waits in a minute. And then we also do it each day. So one more piece with goals. Goals can also have the condition as exit criteria. So if I meet the goal, I want to eject you from the interaction. I don't need to send you an email 10 days later say, oh, please register if you're already confirmed. So I eject that contact. So I'm going to take a small second, and I won't break away from the slides too often, but I want to actually show you Journey Builder, the UI. And of course, I'm logged out. So Journey Builder here. A couple things really want to share with you here. I open this interaction here. You're going to notice that there's a timeline view here, and that's because marketers think in terms of elapsed time. And I've already talked about that quite a bit. So that's why we have that view. We also, if you don't want to see it in that view, you can see it in a flow view. You can actually see more of a workflow format. This is actually my preferred view. You can also drill in, so we have days, hours, and minutes. So I'm going to drill into minutes here. Scroll over. So I've already sort of started an interaction here. You can see I've got this trigger. I've already created that. It's called registered. There's this filter. So there's this expression as Jake confirmed. And then I want to show you these waits. So waits are not just the edge of the graph. They're actually activities. So the interaction's triggered. I make a decision. I'm going to wait X number of minutes. In this case, it's a single minute because I don't want to wait a day, and nor do you in the audience to see an email arrive. So that's how you build it. You simply drag and drop things on the screen, onto our canvas. And then you can activate that. Now, when you activate an interaction, saving's pretty quick. Activation may take a minute. And the reason for that is we're doing all this validation in the back end. So, for example, we're making sure that the email's valid, that we're creating a triggered send, so when this is in execution mode, the email will actually flow through the system. So all activities on the screen have some sort of thing they need to do for setup. So there we go, it's activated. And really, it is that simple. That's really what it is. So I don't know if anyone's interested, but I do want to show you real quickly the contact model. So I was talking about that holistic view of a customer, and we've got what is called this constellation view. And it's a really nice way for marketers to see all their attributes. In this case, I have a registration group, and that's linked to this data extension that has these different types of, or these different fields. GitHub username is what I'm going to use later in an example. So the really exciting thing about this is behind the scenes, we're using our APIs, which are public. You can use them. And what we're doing when you build out this workflow is we're actually building out a JSON object that contains everything you need to create interaction. So I want to talk about that in a minute, but I just wanted to show you here, I have activities. I've got my trigger defined here. The type is a contact decision in this case, so triggers can actually be any sort of decision type. And then I'll have my goal, which I didn't define one. If I wanted to invoke this, I can also do that via API. I simply post to my events here, and I include the data that is in that data extension. And then I'll return this event instance ID, which you want to hold on to, because that'll give you, you'll be able to track that event through the system. So, let's talk a little bit more about the APIs. I'm not going to go into too detail because I don't want to bore you to death, but so this workflow document is what I sort of just talked about now. And the reason we created this single object, so interactions, when you define them for the API, they are atomic objects. And the reason we did that was for simplicity's sake. So instead of having to manage multiple endpoints for activities and triggers and goals and make sure that everything's coordinated correctly, we built this, or we've defined this sort of specification for workflows, which includes everything you need, and it's very easy to see at a glance what's going on in that interaction. It's key-based, so instead of an ID, we do generate one automatically, but you can use keys so you can easily read it when you look at it. It's also very handy when we want to do things like versioning. And versions are really important to marketers because they're how you tune, based on the goals that you set and the analytics that are being generated, they're how you tune the interaction. So if I want to create a version via API, all I have to do is get version 1 and then make the modifications and post that to the endpoint, and voila, I have version 2. And then just to point a couple things out. So outcomes, I haven't really talked about that. Outcomes are very easy to define. It's obviously what is the next activity after this one. In this case, I have a wait activity here. And my next activity is going to be email. And I just use a key. So email 1 would be the key for the next activity. And then two other things. First, let's talk about configuration arguments. So those are things that I need at publish time. They're static values. They're things like, for example, on the wait, I'm going to wait 1 day, and the unit is days. The duration is 1. That's not going to change. That's different from arguments. Those are data bindable. And what I mean by that is I could have, so in my example I was using, I have a GitHub username that's going to come in on that event. I don't know that at the time I build my definition. But I do know that at time of execution because I can bind to that data that was part of that payload that came in. And that's where you would define that. So this particular activity wait doesn't have any arguments. But you can imagine if I had a custom activity and I want that GitHub username or GitHub handle, I could have one there. And I'll talk more about data binding in a minute. So extending Journey Builder. This is probably the piece most everyone here is interested in. And why would you do it? So Journey Builder is pretty powerful. We've got a couple things out of the box. We've got mobile messaging. We've got email messaging. But we find that people have, and developers and marketers have use cases that we don't know about or just can't solve en masse or don't need to do. So we've built this, obviously, in a way that you can extend it. And you do that by building custom activities. One particular use case that I found most people that are building activities, the reason they need it is because data lives outside of ExactTarget or the Marketing Cloud. And they want to be able to post something to an endpoint, do something or retrieve information and return it to Journey Builder and to that interaction, then to do something with that. And that's that data. You can use data binding to make that work. But that's why people write these. So I think one example was a company in Germany that wanted to get some point of sales data out of their system. They didn't want to host it inside our system. They only wanted it to live in memory. And so they built an activity to do that. So I'm not going to go too nitty-gritty into actual code, but how you build custom activities is you go to App Center, which is at code.exacttarget.com, and you create an account. You can get a free demo account for the Marketing Cloud there for developers. You build your activity. So activities live external to the Marketing Cloud. You can host them anywhere. So once you've built your activity, you can push it to Heroku. Technically, you could push it to any other cloud, but obviously I'm partial to Heroku. So you can do that. And then you add that activity, you register that with the application. So when the application is installed for a customer, it'll show in their toolbox. So those are the steps. So as I mentioned already, activities are hosted outside of the Marketing Cloud. We iframe them in, and we use a lightweight JavaScript library called Postmonger to do cross-domain communication. So it's event-driven. So when the page loads up, we call the event loading. You do the magic to load your screen. We pass you any data that might have already been configured. You can load up in your UI. Then the user hits done. Now that's not the same as user clicking save. They've clicked done. The configuration is ready. And then when they click save on that interaction, what we're going to do is then post to an endpoint. So you'll have a save, a validate, and publish endpoint. So you want to do things like set up your activity or anything in your system that you're going to need to be prepared for execution time or runtime. That's particularly important for validate and publish, because on validate, if you return a 500 or an error, the whole interaction won't publish. So you want to make sure that it's doing what you need it to do. And then publish to do things like our mobile apps have to add some information to those campaigns to prep them for execution. And then we do the same thing for execution. We have the engine actually posts out. It's synchronous. We expect a 200 back. But you do what you need to do and return the data that you may need to return. And so the final piece I want to talk about is data binding. This is my favorite feature, only because it's so powerful. There are different ways you can data bind. You can data bind to the event data, so that was from the API. In this sample I've been using throughout this presentation, I've been using GitHub username. And so what will happen here is on execution, when I post to this URI for your activity execute URL, I'll bind to that username. So Jacob R. Miller will actually be post to the endpoint, not this expression. You can also use contact data. It's coming from the contact model. So in the Marketing Cloud, most customers really know their data, and they already have it all set up, and it's all in our system. And so it's very easy to data bind that to that. So if you know you want the contact's default email address, you say contact.default email address, and that's what we'll send to you at runtime. And one more thing I need to mention here. It also works for out arguments. So we post this information, you do something, return out arguments to us. Those arguments can be used later in that interaction. So 10 activities down, they want to use, if you've returned some sort of confirmation, and they want to send you an email depending on what that confirmation was, they could use that to make that decision. So I've gone over the anatomy of an interaction. We've talked about how you can manage them using our APIs. And we've discussed custom activities, so how you can extend it. I now would like to open up for questions, because I know it's sort of a new thing. Yes, sir?
Will this content be available after the session?
Yes, I can. What I'll do is I'll tweet a link to it. My handle is _JR Miller, and I'm sorry?
Can you spell it out for us?
Yeah. Actually, I can give you my card after this, too. I go here. There you go. Any other questions? Yeah. You'd have to write an activity. We've got a GitHub repo that you can just fork and easily create one, though. So it's actually pretty straightforward to do. And you could do it that way. We don't have capability just yet to be able to do the web service from within the app itself. Like Apex, you can do that, right? And it'd be really awesome to do in Journey Builder, and that's where we want to go. We're just not quite there yet. I say that again? Right. Yeah, it had to be a separate activity. Yeah, yeah. And you don't have to have weights between them either. It can just be send email, do my custom action, but yeah. Yep. Yep. Anything else? No. All right. I'm going to hang out there if anyone has anything they want to ask one-on-one. Thank you for coming. I'm a little short. I have a little bit extra time, so I apologize for that. But thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of Dreamforce.